Hi, my name's Bill. I love music and I love records, and I want to welcome you to another video that I'm doing for a YouTube channel called Spin and Chatter. And I want to thank everybody who's been watching. If you enjoy the videos, I would appreciate it if you hit like and subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment. I love reading the comments and hearing what you have to say. So today's video is about one and done attempts at hip hop. Unusual hip hop albums that fly below the radar, that are relatively obscure. So, just to preface that, when I was a kid, I remember in the early to mid 80s, I grew up outside Philadelphia. There was a radio station that would play hip hop on Sundays, and I don't remember for the life of me what this station was, but it was a pretty good education on hip hop at the time. I heard things like Houdini and Curtis Blow and Grandmaster Flash and just all kinds of great stuff. And when I got a couple years older, I remember being really interested in these budget rap compilations that would come out. I remember getting a Walkman for Christmas, and one of the first tapes I got for that was a compilation called Rap's Greatest Hits. I think it was on Priority Records, if I am not mistaken, and that had Run DMC and Doug E. Fresh. Uh, I mean, at the time, just really big names in hip hop. And so when you think of 80s hip hop, those are, some of the people that you think about. You also might think of the Beastie Boys. You might think of De La Soul. But you were unlikely to think of Surf MCs. So this is an album that came out in 1987 on Profile Records. It's called Surf or Die, and it's by a group called the Surf MCs, as I mentioned earlier. The story behind this, how I got my hands on this, is it came in a large record lot that I got that was almost all radio station promos. And the story of how I got that record lot is probably the subject of another video. it just Let's just leave it at it was one of the best scores I ever had in my life. And there was some oddball stuff in there, a lot of stuff I never heard of, including this. Um, so this album cover reminds me of, you know, I don't know whether you remember gotcha shirts, but I remember wearing gotcha shirts when I was a kid. They were like these kind of surf-oriented shirts that they said gotcha on the corner. I think in the upper left, and on the back there would be a design. When I see this cover, I think of kind of like Spuds MacKenzie inspired beach party vibe. um, so I put this on, and the first song, the opening track is "Surf or Die," the title track, and it starts off with the verse, "We were born in the year of our Lord, with nothing on our backs but our funky surfboards." Okay, and the lyrics tend to go downhill from there. I am not big on knocking down straw men. I'm not big on, criticizing something relentlessly or trashing things. It's just not what I like to do. Um, Having said that, um, I don't know much about this band, but I'd imagine that it's kind of like a gimmicky attempt at a West Coast response to the Beastie Boys. It's not really, it's not an album that I think I would revisit very often. Uh, it's just, I mean, it's kind of fun because the lyrics haven't aged well and they're kind of cringy and they're unintentionally humorous. But, after listening to songs like Gotta Get Air and Can't Get a Tan, you know, um, it's fun, but the joke kind of gets stale after a while. Even if it's unintentional. One thing that is kind of interesting about this, though, even after I said that it's not really my cup of tea. It did come with this sticker, the Surf MC sticker. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, that's the Surf MCs. Oh, sticker's falling out there. And it's again, it's one that is kind of fun to have in my collection to show to people or to put on once in a while for a couple laughs. But it's not something that is really going to be a mainstay or anything for me. But that's the Surf MCs. The next group I want to talk about is a group called White Boys. And this album is called On a Mission. It was released in 1988 on Tin Pan Apple. Now, Tin Pan Apple is a label that was started by the Fat Boys manager. And it was distributed by Tin Pan Apple records were distributed by Polygram and later by Mercury. This isn't too bad, actually. It's better than you might think. It's got an interesting cover of Play That Funky Music, and it's also got a pretty good track called This Is Hardcore, Is It Not? With kind of like a heavy driving guitar in it, and it's not bad. The production does sound a little bit dated by today's standards, but that was just a product of the 80s. I mean, you have an 80s hip-hop record, it's going to have 80s sounding production, right? One of the members of this, I believe, is of White Boys is Todd Ray. And from what I was reading, Todd Ray is known as T-Ray, and he did some work with Cypress Hill. So that's kind of interesting. And I want to say that I read that he did something with Helmet also, something to do with the Judgment Night soundtrack. Again, I'm not incredibly well versed on it, but that's kind of an interesting resume. So this is an interesting one. You might like it if you like the Fat Boys, particularly the Fat Boys album Crushin'. You might get a kick out of this one. White Boys, On a Mission. All right. So the next one I want to talk about is a little bit of an intro for. So if you're into punk and metal from the 80s, you're probably familiar to some extent with Wendy O. Williams. She was a singer that was best known for her work with a band called Plasmatics. That was an 80s punk band turned metal, kind of thrash, went in that kind of direction. She did some solo work. Her first solo album is really good. It's got a song called It's My Life, which there was a video for on MTV. And she was also in a movie called Reform School Girls in 1986, which is kind of like a takeoff on juvenile delinquency films. So her final studio album was actually a hip-hop project. And that is this. Ultrafly and the Hometown Girls, Deafest and Baddest. So this is definitely the heaviest of the three albums that I talk about today. And it's probably the one that I like the most out of the three. It's fun. It's got edgier lyrics. Although out of Wendy O. Williams' output, this is not really one that I revisit very often. It is worth checking out, especially if you've never heard of it. I mean, it's kind of interesting to hear Wendy O. Williams doing hip hop. She, once in a while on this record, she unleashes that raspy kind of vocal style that she has and that we all know and love. And it's a good record. And the first track, Rulers of Rock, is really one of the best ones. And it kind of sets the tone for the whole album. It's got that driving guitar. It's catchy. It's a good gateway into this record. My favorite Wendy O. Williams are probably my favorite albums that she's done are probably the Plasmatics Coup d'Etat. I just love that record, and her first solo album. I do want to mention that Wendy O. Williams, unfortunately, we lost her in 1998. She was 48 years old and unfortunately made the decision to take her own life. So, I mean, that's just, completely tragic, Um, but, if you're a Plasmatics fan and you're not aware of this album, it's worth checking out. So, there you have it. Those are three unusual attempts at hip hop. Um, three one and done LPs by one and done hip hop groups. Again, thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and hope to see you again. Thanks.